By now, you should be very familiar with graduate attribute, knowledge and attitude profile, complex engineering problems, complex engineering activities, and also sustainable development goals. Remember, in the early of our module, we mentioned about all these components as a part of the learning outcome, as a part of the OBE. Now, if you put all these things together, you have PO, graduate attributes, knowledge profile, complex problem solving, complex engineering activities, and sustainable development goal. You will see the relationships. We have 11 graduate attributes. When we are designing a program, we need program outcomes. The program outcome should be designed to address each of the graduate attributes. You can design totally in the proper sequence. Some universities choose to have the program objective in different sequence. The bottom line here, it will be all the graduate attributes should be addressed. And you're going to make sure your program outcome offers nothing less than what is required in the graduate attributes. And then you have a series of knowledge profiles. In total, there are 9 knowledge profiles. In this table, the knowledge profile is not arranged in the proper sequence because I would like to classify the relevant knowledge profile with WP1. WP1 clearly specified WK 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 to be relevant to WP1. In order to have WP1 in the complex engineering problem, you will need at least one of these WKs. With that, WK 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 are classified under WP1. The rest, we put it outside. We have the complex engineering problems, WP. In total, we have 7 WP. I group the WP into 3 groups here, as they carry different characteristics. WP1 can carry the WK 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. This will be the compulsory for the complex engineering problems. You will require at least 2 of these WP, starting from WP2 to WP7. You can have all, depending on the problem that you have designed. Now, WP2 has the components of sustainable development goals. This is, of course, when you want to consider the term sustainability here as a part of SDG. And WK5 here also has the sustainable development goal, as you want to go for a more conservative manner, that these are also considered as a part of SDG. WK7 has no argument. It has been clearly stated to incorporate the SDG. Now you will see everything with WK7, WK5, and WP2 here will have SDG. From the perspective of graduate attributes, WA2 and WA6 has been specifically mentioned with sustainable development. Therefore, you know that there should be SDG for WA2 and WA6. How about WA3? If you want to consider this as a part of SDG, now when you encounter WA3, all this should be SDG. Now what will happen? All the cells highlighted in green here will have SDG, which means that if the course outcome is addressing to the graduate attribute 2, graduate attribute 3, and graduate attribute 6, there should be SDG. If the knowledge profile WK5 and WK7, there should be SDG. And if you have complex engineering problem addressing WP2, there should be SDG. This is about the SDG. How about the relationship between the knowledge profile and the graduate attributes? We discussed this in our previous videos. These are the relationship and the mapping. What we need to do is to transfer the mapping to here. Of course, it is not in the proper sequence. You have to map accordingly. Next, how about the relationship between the graduate attributes and the complex engineering problems? WA1 to WA6 will require complex engineering problems, as indicated by the box here. Next is about the complex engineering activity. The complex engineering activities have 5 attributes, which is EA1 to EA5. It is related to WA9, which is the communications, as it is clearly specified to have complex engineering activities. You will need at least 2 EA to have the complex engineering activities. With that, if you are dealing with PO1 to PO6, you will need at least 3 WP, one of which must be WP1. If you are dealing with PO9, you will need at least 2 EA, any 2 out of the 5. As for the SDG, PO2, PO6, WK7 are that you must have, as this has the sustainable development clearly stated in the IEA document. As for PO3, WK5 and WP2, SDG is something that good to have. Although it is not clearly stated to have sustainable development, but there are some components seems to be related to the sustainable development. I would say that it might not be a full-fledged SDG, but it carries some components of the SDG. Now, most of the university would like to play safe in order to avoid their program being penalized by the accreditation bodies. They will consider this as a part of the SDG as well. The next question is, how do you use this table? Remember that normally you deliver a program through a series of courses. In each course, there will be 3 to 4 course outcomes. Everything goes back to the course outcome. There will be mapping between the course outcome to the program outcome. Now you need to observe the program outcome that be made by the respective course outcome. What are the graduate attributes that the program outcome is addressing? And then you work out the components based on the graduate attributes. Let's say now you have identified you are dealing with graduate attribute 2. Your next step now, it will be looking at the knowledge profile of the course being offered. Let's say now you are dealing with WK4, specialist knowledge. Then you are looking at this column here. Since you are dealing with PO2, which is addressing the WA2, you will need the complex engineering problems, as this fall within the box here. With that, you have WK4. You will need to make sure the other components of WP1 so that you secure WP1 when you're designing the complex engineering problems. You also know that there should be SDG. Therefore, when you're designing the complex engineering problems, make sure you put in the considerations related to the SDG in the problems, which at the same time, you cover the SDG. Next, you need another 2 WP here. Depending on the problems that you are designing, you can choose any 2 out of WP2 to WP7, or you can have more. Since you already have the SDG now, incorporating WP2, let's say, in your design of the problem, the SDG is already there, so you should have no issue with WP2 as well. You just need to make sure for WP2 there are sustainable development goals which can be the same that you apply to this. And then at the end of the day, you will know the specifications. The CO is attending to PO2, which is addressing the graduate attribute 2, and it should have SDG. The knowledge profile is WK4, and you have to have WP1 plus any 2 or more of those from WP2 to WP7. This is how you use this table. Taking another example, let's say now you have a CO attending to PO9. This is addressing WA9. So far, there is no requirement on SDG. There is also no requirements on the complex engineering problems. But you will need the complex engineering activities. You need at least 2 EA here. Now it depends on the knowledge profile that the course is related to. Let's say now the course is related to WK7. Due to WK7, you need SDG. So ultimately, the course outcome attending to PO9, which is addressing WA9, has the knowledge profile of WK7. You will need to design the engineering activities containing the SDGs. You don't have to deal with complex engineering problems unless this complex engineering activities is catering for more than one PO. If you are using one-to-one model, that means this complex engineering activities is addressing 2 CO, one of which is PO9. Another CO can be any of these POs. Only then the complex engineering problems are incorporated. If you only deal with one CO and that CO is meant for PO9, you don't have to have complex engineering problems. Now let us look at the third example. This time the CO is attending to PO10. PO10 is meant for WA10. There is no SDG. Let's say now the knowledge profile is WK8. PO10 do not require complex engineering problems. Although you have WK8, it is up to you. Do you want these components? Even though you have these components and you have WP1, Without the other WP, it is still not complex engineering problem. Since the complex engineering problem is not required, you can just leave it. WKX do not have SDG as well, so you don't need to incorporate SDG. And there is also no complex engineering activities, so this CO is relatively simple. We only need to address WA10. No SDG, no complex engineering problem, and no complex engineering activities. I hope this table can be useful for you to determine the components that comes together with the learning outcome. This should give you a clearer picture how the golden triangles works.